The sun was setting over the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and white picket fences. Officer Daniel Harper sat in his patrol car, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he waited for dispatch to confirm his next call. He had been a police officer for 15 years, but lately it felt like every day brought new frustrations. His once pristine uniform now bore faint coffee stains, and his usually sharp jawline seemed weighed down by stress. The radio crackled to life. Unit 24, we have a noise complaint at 43 Maplewood Lane. Residents report loud music coming from the address. Daniel sighed heavily, grabbing his hat from the passenger seat before stepping out of the car. Noise complaints were among the most tedious calls, but they came with the job. As he drove toward Maplewood Lane, his mind wandered back to earlier that week, another heated argument with his teenage son about respecting authority and how times had changed since he was young. These thoughts only deepened the frown etched onto his face. When Daniel arrived at 43 Maplewood Lane, he noticed an expensive sedan parked neatly in the driveway. It wasn't the kind of vehicle he expected to see given the nature of the complaint. Still, appearances could be deceiving. He approached the front door cautiously, hand resting near his holster just in case. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Standing there was Dr. Maya Thompson, a successful physician who had recently moved into the area. She wore a casual yet elegant outfit, a crisp blouse paired with tailored slacks, and her dark curls framed her face perfectly. In one hand, she held a glass of water, while the other rested lightly on the doorframe. Her expression shifted quickly from surprise to mild annoyance when she saw the uniform. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, though her tone carried a hint of defensiveness. "I'm here about a noise complaint," Daniel replied gruffly, not bothering to soften his voice. "Someone reported loud music coming from this house." Maya blinked, clearly taken aback. "Loud music? That's odd because I haven't even turned on the stereo today. Are you sure this is the right address?" Daniel frowned. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to deny responsibility during a disturbance call. His years on the force had taught him to trust no one completely, not even those who appeared innocent. Something about Maya's calm demeanor irked him further. Maybe it was the way she stood so confidently, or perhaps it was the subtle upward tilt of her chin that reminded him too much of people he'd clashed with before. "Well, if it's not your music, maybe one of your guests is causing trouble," Daniel said sharply, brushing past her without waiting for permission. He stepped inside, scanning the living room with critical eyes. Everything looked orderly, books stacked neatly on shelves, cushions arranged symmetrically on the couch, and soft lighting illuminating the space. "There's no one else here," Maya said firmly, following him into the room. "I live alone, and I assure you, I haven't disturbed anyone." Her words fell on deaf ears. Daniel continued his inspection, growing increasingly irritated by what he perceived as defiance. When he reached the kitchen, he spotted a Bluetooth speaker sitting on the counter. Without thinking, he picked it up, holding it up accusingly. "What's this? If there's no music playing, why do you need this?" he demanded. "It's called owning electronics," Maya shot back, her patience wearing thin. "You can't just barge into my home and accuse me of things without evidence." For a moment, Daniel froze. There was something about the way she spoke, her confidence, her refusal to back down, that struck a nerve. Memories of all the times he'd encountered resistance during arrests flooded his mind, fueling his frustration. But this wasn't some criminal. This was a woman standing in her own home, defending herself against baseless accusations. And yet, instead of calming himself, Daniel let his emotions get the better of him. With a growl of anger, he slammed the speaker back onto the counter, causing Maya to flinch. "This isn't over," he muttered, turning toward the door. "Next time, keep your noise levels down or else," as he stormed out of the house. Slamming the door behind him, Maya exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall for support. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Was this really how things worked in Willow Creek? Meanwhile, Daniel climbed back into his patrol car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, he already regretted losing his temper, but pride wouldn't let him admit it. Not yet. Little did either of them know, this encounter would set off a chain of events neither could have anticipated. The night air was cool as Maya stood frozen in her kitchen, replaying the scene over and over in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the counter to steady herself. She had always prided herself on being composed, professional, and unflappable, qualities that had served her well in both her personal life and her career as a doctor. But tonight, those qualities felt shaken to their core. what just happened?" She whispered aloud, her voice barely audible. Her thoughts raced. Was this really how people treated each other in Willow Creek? She had moved here seeking peace, a place where she could focus on her work without the chaos of the city. Instead, within hours of settling into her new home, she found herself face to face with hostility she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the way Officer Harper had looked at her, as if her presence alone warranted suspicion. Maya's frustration quickly turned into anger, not just at the officer but also at herself. Why hadn't she demanded his badge number? Why hadn't she recorded the interaction on her phone? As a black woman, she knew better than most how important it was to document such encounters. Yet, caught off guard by his sudden intrusion, she had let him leave without holding him accountable. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "This isn't about you," she reminded herself softly. "It's about ignorance, about fear." Still, the encounter left her unsettled. For the first time since moving in, her beautiful new house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a battleground. Determined to regain control, Maya decided to take action. She grabbed her laptop from the living room and began typing out an email to the local police department's oversight committee. In clear, measured language, she recounted the events of the evening, making sure to include every detail while keeping her tone respectful and factual. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Harper sat parked outside a convenience store, staring blankly at the dashboard lights reflecting off the windshield. His chest felt tight, and his stomach churned with unease. He couldn't stop thinking about what had just transpired at Maya's house. "That woman," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "Why did I lose my temper like that?" Deep down, Daniel knew the answer. It wasn't about the noise complaint or even the Bluetooth speaker. It was something deeper, uglier. A part of him resented Maya before he'd even stepped foot inside her home. The pristine neighborhood, the expensive car, the polished appearance, it all triggered feelings of inadequacy he didn't want to confront. And when she stood up to him so confidently, refusing to shrink away or apologize, it only made things worse. Daniel clenched his jaw, guilt gnawing at him. He had joined the police force because he wanted to make a difference, to protect people and uphold justice. Somewhere along the way, though, he had lost sight of that ideal. Over the years, bitterness and cynicism had crept in, clouding his judgment and hardening his heart. Now, sitting alone in his patrol car, he wondered if he had become the very thing he once despised, someone who judged others based on assumptions rather than facts. He thought back to the look on Maya's face when he slammed the speaker onto the counter. There had been no defiance in her eyes, then only shock and hurt. That image haunted him now, refusing to fade away. "Get a grip," Daniel told himself sternly, rubbing his temples. You can't undo what's done, but as much as he tried to push the incident aside, it lingered in his mind like an open wound. He knew he should report back to the station and file paperwork for the noise complaint, but instead, he found himself driving aimlessly through empty streets, searching for answers he couldn't quite articulate. By the time he returned home late that night, Daniel's wife, Claire, was already asleep. He tiptoed into the bedroom, careful not to wake her, and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. Staring up at the ceiling, he replayed the confrontation again and again, each time cringing at his own behavior. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to feel shame, not just for what he had done but for who he had become. He remembered the early days of his career when he still believed in fairness and equality. Back then, he would have listened to Maya's explanation without jumping to conclusions. He would have apologized for barging into her home unnecessarily. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing people as individuals and started viewing them through the lens of stereotypes and biases. As sleep finally claimed him, Daniel resolved to do one thing differently tomorrow. He would call the station and check if anyone else had filed similar complaints against Maya. If not, he owed her an apology, even if it meant swallowing his pride. Unbeknownst to either of them, their paths were far from finished crossing. What neither Maya nor Daniel realized yet was that this single moment of conflict would spark changes neither of them could foresee, changes that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. The next morning, Maya woke up feeling uneasy. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind like a bad dream she couldn't shake off. She had sent the email to the police oversight committee late last night, hoping it would bring some sense of closure. But now, as sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, doubt crept in. Would anyone even care? Would her words make a difference, or would they simply be dismissed? She decided to focus on what she could control: her work. As a doctor, she had always found solace in helping others. Today's schedule was packed with patients at the local clinic where she volunteered once a week. It was something she did not just out of duty, but also because it grounded her. Treating people from all walks of life reminded her of humanity's shared struggles and resilience. At the clinic, Maya threw herself into her tasks, greeting each patient with warmth and professionalism. Despite her efforts to stay present, however, her thoughts kept drifting back to Officer Harper. She wondered if he realized how much his actions had affected her, or if he even cared. During a brief break between appointments, Maya decided to check her phone. To her surprise, there was an email response from the Oversight Committee. Her heart raced as she opened it. The message was brief but encouraging. "Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We take all complaints seriously and will review the incident thoroughly. Please allow us time to investigate further." Though the reply was formal and impersonal, it gave Maya a small sense of hope. At least someone was listening. Meanwhile, Daniel started his day with a heavy heart. He hadn't slept well, plagued by restless dreams that replayed fragments of his encounter with Maya. When he arrived at the station, he avoided eye contact with his colleagues, knowing full well that guilt was written all over his face. Before heading to his desk, Daniel stopped by the records room to check if any other noise complaints had been filed against Maya. To his relief and slight embarrassment, he found nothing. Not a single report. This only deepened his regret. He had acted rashly, letting his biases cloud his judgment. Now, he owed her an apology, but apologizing wasn't something Daniel did easily. As he sat at his desk staring blankly at his computer screen, his partner, Officer Lisa Morales, approached him. Lisa was younger than Daniel, with a sharp wit and a compassionate nature. They had worked together for years, and while they didn't always see eye to eye, Lisa respected Daniel's experience. Today, though, she noticed something was off. "You okay, Dan?" she asked, leaning against his desk. "You look like you haven't slept in days." Daniel hesitated, unsure whether to confide in her. Finally, he sighed and said, "I messed up last night, Lisa. Big time." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Reluctantly, Daniel recounted the incident at Maya's house, leaving out no detail. As he spoke, he felt a mix of shame and frustration bubbling to the surface. Lisa listened quietly, her expression unreadable until he finished. "Wow," she said after a moment. "That doesn't sound like you, Dan, at least not the guy I used to know." Her words stung, but they were true. Daniel nodded slowly. "I don't know what got into me. I let my guard down and, I don't know, I guess I've become someone I don't recognize anymore." Lisa placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what you do next. If you want to fix this, start by owning up to it." Her advice stayed with Daniel long after she walked away. For the rest of the day, he wrestled with the idea of reaching out to Maya. Apologizing wouldn't be easy, especially given the tension between them. Yet, deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do. Later that evening, as Daniel drove home, he passed the clinic where Maya volunteered. On impulse, he pulled over and parked nearby, watching as people came and went. Through the glass doors, he spotted Maya interacting with a young child and their parent. Even from afar, her kindness was evident: the way she smiled, the gentle tone of her voice. It was a stark contrast to the image he had conjured in his mind during their confrontation. For the first time, Daniel saw Maya not as a stereotype or a threat, but as a human being, a professional dedicated to serving others. The realization hit him hard. How could he have judged her so harshly without knowing anything about her? Determined to make amends, Daniel decided to write a letter. He wasn't ready to face her in person yet, but he needed to express his remorse somehow. Sitting at his kitchen table that night, he began drafting the words carefully, choosing each one with deliberate thoughtfulness. "Dear Dr. Thompson," he wrote, "I owe you an apology for my behavior last night." As he poured his feelings onto paper, Daniel felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. Writing the letter wasn't enough, it was only the beginning. But for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this mistake could lead to something better. Something transformative. Unknown to both of them, the ripple effects of their encounter were spreading far beyond their individual lives. Their story was about to intersect with others in ways neither could have imagined, setting the stage for growth, understanding, and perhaps even redemption. The next morning, Maya arrived at the clinic early, eager to start her day with a fresh perspective. She had spent the previous evening trying to focus on her patients and the positive impact she could make in their lives. But as much as she tried to push the incident with Officer Harper out of her mind, it lingered like an unwelcome shadow. Even the reassuring email from the Oversight Committee hadn't fully erased her unease. As she unlocked the clinic's front door, she noticed a plain white envelope tucked under the welcome mat. Puzzled, she picked it up and turned it over. There was no return address, only her name written neatly in blue ink, Dr. Maya Thompson. Her curiosity piqued. She opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her breath caught as she began reading, "Dear Dr. Thompson, I owe you an apology for my behavior last night. I acted unprofessionally and allowed my biases to cloud my judgment. It was wrong of me to accuse you without evidence or to treat you disrespectfully in your own home. You deserve better than that, not just from me, but from everyone who interacts with you. Please know that I am truly sorry for what happened, and I will do everything in my power to ensure it doesn't happen again." Maya read the letter twice, her emotions swirling between disbelief and cautious hope. She hadn't expected an apology, let alone one so heartfelt. For a moment, she wondered if it was genuine or simply a calculated attempt to avoid consequences. Yet, something about the tone of the words felt sincere, almost raw. She folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope, her mind racing. What should she do now? Should she respond, ignore it, or use this opportunity to confront him directly? Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa Morales, Officer Harper's partner. Lisa introduced herself briefly, explaining that she worked alongside Daniel and wanted to discuss the incident further. Though hesitant at first, Maya agreed to meet her later that afternoon at a nearby cafe. At the same time, Daniel sat nervously in his patrol car, staring at the empty envelope he had left outside Maya's clinic. He hadn't been able to muster the courage to deliver the letter in person, so he had resorted to leaving it anonymously. Now, doubt crept in. Had it been the right move? Would Maya even believe him after everything that had happened? His thoughts were interrupted when Lisa called him. "Hey Dan," she said casually, though her tone hinted at seriousness. "I reached out to Dr. Thompson. We're meeting later today to talk." Daniel's stomach dropped. "You did what?" he asked, his voice tinged with panic. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone needs to bridge this gap," Lisa replied firmly. "You wrote the letter, which is a good first step, but you can't just leave it at that. If you really want to make things right, you'll have to face her eventually." Daniel sighed, knowing Lisa was right. Still, the thought of confronting Maya filled him with dread. He imagined her anger, her disappointment, and worse, her indifference. Would she even give him a chance to explain? That afternoon, Maya arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, clutching the envelope tightly in her hand. She chose a quiet corner table and ordered a cup of tea, her nerves buzzing as she waited. When Lisa walked in, Maya recognized her immediately from the badge clipped to her belt. Lisa smiled warmly and approached the table. "Dr. Thompson?" Lisa said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me. Please, call me Maya," she replied, shaking Lisa's hand. "And thank you for reaching out." They sat down, and Lisa wasted no time getting to the point. "I wanted to apologize on behalf of my partner and the department for what happened." Daniel, "Well, he's not usually like that. At least, he didn't used to be." Maya listened intently, her expression guarded. "He left me a letter this morning," she admitted, pulling the envelope from her bag. "It was unexpected." Lisa nodded, unsurprised. "That sounds like him. He's stubborn but tries to do the right thing when it matters." "Look, I'm not excusing his behavior, I'm just saying he's human, and humans make mistakes. But he genuinely wants to make amends. Are you open to hearing him out?" Maya hesitated, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to dismiss the idea entirely, to let the Oversight Committee handle things and move on with her life. But another part of her, a deeper, more compassionate part, recognized that forgiveness wasn't just about absolving others. It was also about freeing herself from bitterness. "I'll think about it," Maya said finally, her voice soft but firm. "But if I agree to meet him, it has to be on my terms." Lisa smiled gratefully. "That's fair. Just let me know what you decide." Later that evening, as Maya reflected on the conversation, she realized how much power she held in this situation. She could choose to hold on to resentment, or she could extend grace, not because Daniel deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel spent the same evening wrestling with similar thoughts. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he hoped against all odds that this moment might mark the beginning of change. For both of them, their paths were still uncertain, but one thing was clear: the ripple effects of their encounter were far from over. 2 days later, Maya found herself standing outside a small community center near the edge of Willow Creek. The building was unassuming brick walls covered in ivy, with large windows that let sunlight stream into the cozy interior. It wasn't a police station or her clinic, which made it neutral ground for what she hoped would be a productive conversation. Lisa had arranged the meeting, suggesting this location as a safe space where both parties could speak openly without judgment. Maya appreciated the thoughtfulness behind the choice. Still, as she adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath, her nerves threatened to get the better of her. What if Daniel wasn't sincere? What if this was all just an act? Inside, Lisa greeted her warmly and led her to a quiet room. At the back of the center, the space was simple yet inviting: a round table surrounded by chairs, potted plants in the corners, and soft lighting that created a calming atmosphere. Sitting at the table was Daniel, his hands clasped tightly together. As he stared down at the surface, for a moment, neither of them spoke. Maya studied him carefully, noting how different he looked compared to their first encounter. Gone was the stern, imposing figure who had barged into her home. In his place was a man who seemed smaller somehow. His shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said finally, his voice low but steady. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm glad you're here." Maya nodded slowly, taking a seat across from him. "I'll admit, I wasn't sure about this," she replied honestly. "But I believe in second chances if they're genuine." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Daniel swallowed hard, clearly struggling to find the right response. For once, his usual bravado was absent, replaced by vulnerability. "I owe you more than an apology," he began, his gaze fixed on the table. "What I did was wrong, not just because it was unprofessional, but because it was cruel. I judged you before I even knew you, and that's not something I can excuse or justify. All I can do is tell you how sorry I am and promise to learn from my mistakes." Maya listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She wanted to believe him, to see the sincerity in his words, but years of facing prejudice had taught her to tread carefully. Trust wasn't easily given, especially to someone who represented authority in ways that often felt oppressive. After a pause, she leaned forward slightly. "Why did you judge me?" she asked, her tone calm but probing. "Was it because I'm black? Because I stood up to you? Or was it something else entirely?" Daniel flinched at the directness of her question, but he didn't shy away from it. Instead, he met her gaze for the first time since she entered the room. "To be honest, I think it was all of those things," he admitted. "You didn't fit the image I had in my head of what someone in your neighborhood should look like or act like. And when you challenged me, I felt threatened. Not physically, but emotionally, like my authority was being questioned." His honesty surprised Maya. She hadn't expected him to delve so deeply into his own biases, let alone acknowledge them aloud. It was uncomfortable and yet strangely refreshing. Lisa, who had been observing silently from the corner, chimed in gently. "This is good, Dan. Owning up to your feelings is the first step toward real change." Daniel nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "I've spent most of my career thinking I was doing the right thing," he continued, turning back to Maya. "But lately, I've realized how blind I've been to other people's experiences, to my own shortcomings. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes. If you're willing, I'd like to hear your side of things. Really hear it." Maya hesitated, weighing his request. This was her chance to share the weight she carried daily: the subtle microaggressions, the assumptions, the constant need to prove herself. But opening up meant risking further hurt, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Being black in this country isn't easy," she said. "Every day, we face challenges that many people never have to think about. We work twice as hard to earn half the respect. We smile through insults, big and small, because fighting back isn't always an option. When you walked into my home, I saw fear in your eyes, not of me, but of what you assumed I represented. That hurt more than anything else." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he listened, guilt and shame washing over him. He couldn't imagine living under such scrutiny, carrying that burden every single day. Yet, hearing Maya's perspective gave him a glimpse of a world he had never truly understood. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. I wish I could take it all back, Maya sighed softly, leaning back in her chair. You can't undo the past, she said, but maybe you can help create a better future for yourself and others. The room fell silent again, but this time, the tension felt lighter. Both Maya and Daniel knew they were only at the beginning of a long journey, one that required patience, effort, and mutual understanding. Yet, for the first time, there was hope. As they left the community center separately, each carried a renewed sense of purpose. Maya resolved to continue advocating for justice, while Daniel vowed to confront his biases and become a better version of himself. Their paths might diverge after this meeting, but the impact of their conversation would ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their own. In the days following their meeting, both Maya and Daniel found themselves reflecting deeply on their conversation. Though they had parted ways with no promises or guarantees, the encounter lingered in their minds like an unfinished chapter. For Maya, it was a reminder of the resilience required to navigate a world that often misunderstood her. For Daniel, it became a catalyst for change, a spark that ignited a desire to confront not just his own biases but also the systemic issues within his profession. Daniel began by reaching out to Lisa again. I need your help, he admitted one evening as they sat together at the station. I want to do more than apologize. I want to make a difference. Lisa raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What did you have in mind? I've been thinking about how we handle complaints and how we treat people during routine calls, Daniel explained. There's so much room for improvement. What if we started training sessions focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques? Not just for rookies, but for everyone. Lisa smiled, impressed by his initiative. That's actually a great idea. Let me see what resources I can find. Maybe we could bring in someone from outside the department to lead workshops. Over the next few weeks, Daniel threw himself into planning these sessions. He reached out to community leaders, including Maya's colleague Dr. Eleanor Ruiz, who agreed to speak about implicit bias and its impact on marginalized communities. To his surprise, many officers were receptive to the idea, though some remained skeptical. Daniel knew changing ingrained attitudes wouldn't happen overnight, but every small step counted. Meanwhile, Maya continued her work at the clinic, pouring her energy into helping patients and mentoring young medical students. Yet, she couldn't shake the sense that her encounter with Daniel had opened a door, one she hadn't expected but felt compelled to walk through. One afternoon, as she treated a teenage boy named Marcus, she noticed the fear in his eyes when he mentioned being stopped by police while walking home from school. His story struck a chord with Maya. She realized that while individual apologies mattered, broader action was needed to address the mistrust between law enforcement and communities of color. Inspired, Maya decided to organize a community forum. Titled Bridging the Divide, Conversations Between Law Enforcement and Citizens, the goal was simple: create a space where residents could voice their concerns directly to officers and vice versa. With the support of local organizations and volunteers, she secured a venue and sent out invitations, including one addressed to Daniel Harper. When Daniel received the invitation, he hesitated. Attending meant stepping back into the spotlight, facing people whose trust he had broken. But it also meant honoring the commitment he'd made to listen, learn, and grow. After consulting with Lisa, he accepted. The night of the forum arrived, and the community center buzzed with anticipation. Residents filled the rows of chairs, their expressions ranging from hopeful to guarded. On stage, Maya stood alongside other panelists, including Dr. Ruiz and a retired detective who specialized in conflict resolution. At the back of the room, Daniel sat quietly, feeling out of place yet determined to participate. As the discussion unfolded, emotions ran high. One woman recounted how her son had been wrongfully detained. Another shared how traffic stops left her too afraid to drive at night. Each story painted a vivid picture of the challenges faced by Black and brown communities. When it came time for questions, Daniel raised his hand tentatively. Standing up, he introduced himself and then spoke candidly. "I'm not here to defend my actions or those of anyone else in uniform," he said, "but I am here to say that I hear you, I see you, and I want to be part of the solution." His words weren't met with applause, but they did elicit nods of acknowledgement. Maya watched him closely, seeing the sincerity in his posture and tone. Though forgiveness wasn't immediate, there was a glimmer of hope, a shared understanding that progress would require effort from both sides. Afterward, several attendees approached Daniel to thank him for showing up. Others voiced lingering doubts, challenging him to prove his intentions over time. Daniel listened patiently, knowing trust was earned slowly. As the event drew to a close, Maya approached him. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "It means a lot." Daniel nodded, meeting her gaze. "Thank you for inviting me. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm willing to keep trying if you'll let me." Maya offered a small smile. "We're all works in progress." Though neither Maya nor Daniel could predict what lay ahead, one thing was certain: the ripple effects of their journey were spreading far beyond them. Their willingness to engage despite discomfort and uncertainty had planted seeds of change. Seeds that, with care and persistence, might someday blossom into something transformative. Months passed, and the ripple effects of Maya and Daniel's encounter continued to spread throughout Willow Creek. What had started as a single moment of conflict had evolved into something much larger, a movement toward understanding, accountability, and healing. For both Maya and Daniel, life had changed in ways they never anticipated. At the police department, Daniel became a driving force behind the cultural sensitivity training sessions he had proposed. The workshops were challenging at times, especially when officers resisted confronting uncomfortable truths about bias and privilege. But slowly, attitudes began to shift. Officers who once dismissed such discussions as unnecessary now found themselves engaging in meaningful conversations, not just with colleagues but also with residents during community outreach programs. Daniel's transformation didn't go unnoticed. His superiors commended him for his leadership, while younger officers looked up to him as an example of growth and humility. Yet, Daniel knew he still had work to do. Every day, he reminded himself why this mattered, not just for his sake but for the community he served. For Maya, the forum had sparked a renewed passion for advocacy. She partnered with local organizations to create mentorship programs aimed at empowering young people of color to pursue careers in medicine, law enforcement, and other fields where representation was sorely needed. Her efforts inspired others to join the cause, creating a network of support that extended far beyond her initial vision. Though their paths no longer crossed as frequently, Maya and Daniel occasionally connected through shared initiatives. One such project involved organizing joint workshops where medical professionals and law enforcement personnel collaborated on strategies to improve public safety and health outcomes. These sessions fostered mutual respect and understanding, breaking down barriers that had long divided the two groups. One evening, after co-leading one of these workshops, Maya and Daniel found themselves standing outside the community center. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. They exchanged smiles, the kind born from hard-earned trust. "You've come a long way," Maya said softly, her tone warm yet honest. "It hasn't been easy for either of us, but I think we're heading in the right direction." Daniel nodded, his gratitude evident. "I couldn't have done it without you or without people like Lisa and Dr. Ruiz pushing me forward. This isn't about me fixing things. It's about all of us working together." Maya agreed, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "Change doesn't happen overnight. It's messy and imperfect. But if we keep showing up, if we stay committed, I believe we can make a real difference." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics: shared interests, hobbies, and even dreams for the future. Though their lives remained distinct, they discovered common ground in their desire to leave the world better than they found it. Neither expected friendship to blossom from their journey, but it did, a testament to the power of empathy and perseverance. As they parted ways that night, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was choosing to move forward despite the pain. And Daniel carried with him a renewed purpose, knowing that every step he took brought him closer to becoming the person he aspired to be. Back in Willow Creek, the changes weren't limited to Maya and Daniel. Residents noticed shifts in how officers interacted with them: more patience, more listening, less judgment. Community forums became regular events, fostering dialogue and collaboration. Schools introduced programs teaching students about diversity and inclusion, planting seeds of compassion in the next generation. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and setbacks. But for the first time in years, there was hope, a shared belief that progress was possible if everyone played their part. In the quiet moments, Maya often thought back to that fateful night when everything began. She realized now that it wasn't just about what Daniel had done, it was about what they had both chosen to do afterward. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes that was enough. As winter settled over Willow Creek, blanketing the town in snow, Maya stood by her living room window, watching children play in the street. Across town, Daniel sat in his patrol car, reflecting on the same scene. Both smiled, knowing that while the journey wasn't over, they were no longer walking it alone. Together, they and countless others had taken the first steps toward a brighter future. Steps fueled not by fear or anger, but by courage, understanding, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of change.